Anyone see a monster? Monster, anyone? Shh. You crazy? He's screaming the forest down. What do you mean? We don't need to be quiet. It's a hobgoblin. They don't have very good hearing. It's not like a werewolf or something. Yeah, well, you know, maybe there are other things other than hobgoblins around, man. You serious? You crazy? Sick in the head? Yeah, I know, right? Werewolves can show up, I understand that. The officer would have to roll double tens. I think we're fine. I mean, that can happen. There is such a thing as bad luck. Ugh. It's right behind me, isn't it? The Silver Bayonet is a Napoleonic squad-based wargame with Gothic horror influences, such as in the style of the Brothers Grimm or the Hammer horror movies. It was written by Joseph A. McCulloch and published by our good friends at Osprey, who have done a ton of stuff. Several things have been done on this channel, in fact. As normal, we'll be looking at the setting, the rules, and the gameplay. So, man the cannons, fire the shots, we be hunting monsters. So the setting for the Silver Bayonet is pretty straightforward. It takes place in historical Napoleonic era, but there are monsters. So vampires, werewolves, trolls, oh my. You take control of a squad of monster hunters employed by one of the world's powers. So British, France, Spanish, like Spain, Austria, and even some sort of offshoots, Canada, the US, and Egypt. There's even, if you don't necessarily have, like, so say you want to play Poland, for example, well, you can absolutely play Poland, just, pick something that's sort of close. I'd probably say Austria sort of area, but it's really up to you. Same with Germany, Prussia. Pick a power that you like the look of, and just use them there. So, for example, my army here, this is mine, this is my son's. He's the Continental Army, so the US. I am the Transylvanians, but I'm using the Austrian rules for my Transylvanian army. So your squad's goal is to gather information, capture monsters, get monster bodies, and artifacts of spiritual nature. Sometimes even just flat gold. The monsters in the game are controlled by a relatively rudimentary AI system, which we'll talk about in the rules, but the goal is to generally kill all the monsters before the opponent does. So, in terms of setting, it's basically PvE. So, player versus environment. So to paraphrase, real world, Napoleonic era, Gothic horror monsters. Let's go over what you need to play Silver Bayonet. So first, we'll need D10s, at least 3 different colored D10s. These are important. Now, they recommend blue, black, red. I only had green. I did order some red dice, but they didn't arrive in time. So, so you'll need 3 different colored dice, and you'll probably need at least 3 in each color for each player playing. You'll, of course, need your friend, the tape measure. Yeah, rather important. So that's all good. You'll also need some tokens. 1 for fatigue, which we use this one, and 1 for knowing when someone's shot their gun. So we just use these red gems that we normally use for activation. You may also want activation tokens, but generally I find because of how small the game is, you pretty much remember who has and who hasn't moved. Miniatures, of course. You'll need some miniatures. You'll need some miniatures for your soldier, and you'll need some miniatures for the monsters as well. You'll need objective markers, no more than 5, or clue markers. I just use these bottle caps that I printed for space kits, but you can use whatever you want. Little treasure chests, stuff like that. You'll also probably need a marker for artifacts as well, because some missions have artifacts or gold that you've got to get off the field. Therefore, you'll need something to carry, because if your guy gets killed, he drops the marker. So, You'll also need some terrain, of course. I've just got these little buildings here. Obviously, you can also have walls. And I've even got a well. And I've also got some bushes and stuff, but terrain. You also need a deck of playing cards. Now I'm just gonna put these. Mostly you'll need ace to 10 in each suit. Nothing too crazy, but once again, you can probably get away with, honestly, ace to 10 in one suit. So ace, king, queen, jack, 10 is what I mean by ace to 10. And then, of course, you'll need a copy of the rules and a unit sheet for each squad. These will be shown on the screen. Ready? Yeah, cool. And that's pretty much all you need to play the game. Okay, so you've got all the stuff you need. Now, before we get into how we set up the game and stuff like that and how we play, let's talk about building a unit. So a unit in this specific sort of thing is the squad. So they call it a unit, which makes sense. It's not referring to an individual model like many other games do. This is referring to the unit as a whole. So, but before we get into that, so yeah, you start building a new unit, you pick a nation. So, as I've previously said, you know, there's a British, France, and so on and so forth. Each nation has a certain type of soldiers that it can take. So, you know, for example, some units can't be taken by other nations. You know, maybe they didn't have riflemen, or maybe they don't have a core infantry unit. But generally, infantry and riflemen are... Well, infantry, pretty much everyone can take. Riflemen, sometimes. It depends on what army you're going with. But, before we do that, we've got to build an officer. So let's take a look at the stats, and then we'll go over how to build an officer. So the first stat is speed. Speed's very straightforward. No problem here. This is how far you move. The only thing that really changes speed... flatly is if you are on a horse, you move 8 inches regardless of what your speed is. Pretty straightforward. Melee, this is pretty straightforward. This is what you add to a melee attack. So you roll the dice, you add this number to it. Accuracy, same thing, but ranged attacks. Defense is the target number you have to beat to hit the target. So, most things have between 12 and 14 defense. Some things will get higher, some things get lower, but for the most part, this is all. You roll your dice, you add your ranged or melee bonus, and then if you hit, you deal damage, which we will get into in the attacking section. Then we have courage. If you need to take a terror check, you roll the dice, add the number to it. Done. Health, well, this is how much damage the guy can take before he is, I guess, knocked out might be the better word. Removed from the board, let's say that, because he may or may not die. Depends on how you roll. And then finally, the recruitment stat, which is for the officer only, and this is pretty much how many points you can spend on your unit. So generally it starts at 100. You can get it to start at 105, which we'll go over in building the officer section. But for the most part, this is sort of how many units you can take. And also, I should probably mention that the maximum models you can take in a unit is 8. So that's an officer plus 7 additional guys. If you have points left over after that, very unlikely, by the way, if you're doing 100 points, you may then, of course, start upgrading units. Okay, so we're going to start with making an officer. The officer has a base stat line, which Rennie will show for me now. Yeah, thank you. They can also take additional upgrades that they get. So they basically get 3 starting upgrades, and they can pick between 1 or 2 things on each category. Sorry, 2 or 3 things on each category. So the first one is they get +1 to their melee or accuracy. So they start at 1 for both, but they can raise one of them to 2. The next one is they can increase their speed or health by 1. So that's good gravy, I guess. You know, do you want to move slightly farther? Do you want to take an additional hit? You will be surprised at how much difference 1 point of health makes in the game. So don't poo-poo it thinking, well, he starts at 12. Surely 13's not that much of a difference. Trust me, it can be if you get hit bad enough. And then finally, they can increase their courage by 1 or their recruitment by 5. I personally took the courage. if you take recruitment, you can't really cash in on it too much until your guy gets to 10 experience, because then he gets another 5 recruitment. But for the most part, yeah, this can make a minor difference. Like, it can be a difference between making cost and not making it. But, you know, so that's the bonus stats the officer gets at the start. But officers also get 2 attributes. So attributes are special traits, which include gain extra dice for your dice pool, which we'll go over what that is. Being better, taking cover better, moving without penalties, or even just flat dealing more damage. Sometimes it may be a combination of a couple of little things. And then finally, officers get 6 equipment points to buy equipment with. These can be mundane items such as, you know, rifles, swords, pistols, and stuff like that. But it can also be special equipment such as, you know, silvered or cold iron weapons, or even special ammo for your guns that you take. So, like, you know, you can take a blunderbuss and load it full of rock salt and shoot a ghost. You can also obviously take silver shot and other things of that nature. So there's a lot of stuff. Once your officer is sorted out, you then have 100 to 105 points, depending on what upgrade you got, to buy other soldiers. Now, obviously, these are ranging from your basic dudes, infantry and riflemen, all the way up to junior officers, dampiers, monster hunters, and of course, heavy and light cavalry. Most of these units come in a pre-built package, so they'll just say like something like, let's show a stat block, Rennie. Yep. Let's show infantry and the junior officer. So as you can see, the junior officer, he gets to pick an attribute, and he starts with either a hand weapon or a fencing weapon and 2 pistols. The infantrymen get nothing. They start with a musket and a cartridge box, which lets them reload their gun. Make sure you, with your officer, you get you get reloads, because obviously if you don't have a cartridge box, you can't reload your gun. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works, and obviously, as you can see, each one is worth a certain amount of points. Junior officers are much more expensive than infantry. Infantry are the base units, they're only worth 10. And obviously, there's a lot of guys you can pick from, but you are of course bound to whatever your army can take. So table setup. So the first thing you need to do is pick a scenario. In this example, we'll pick the first scenario, and you follow the instructions to set it up. So this will involve placing terrain, the markers, get your deck of cards ready, whatever that may be. Once that's done, each player makes their dice pools. Their dice pool is pretty straightforward. So they get 2 power dice and 2 skill dice, and then they also get a monster dice. So, but you also remember that you do need your own copy of these dice. This is the dice pool, so don't forget that you have to include your 2 base dice that you start with. Wow, that was a terrible roll. Alright, and then so what happens is the players roll off to see who goes first. So the second player would have initiative, and then they set up. So pretty much generally the deployment zones are about 2 inches. Obviously the terrain, everything's set up as per the instruction of the scenario. Generally they're pretty open with that, so you generally get a bit of flexibility, but there may be some things that are inflexible, like maybe there's a building in the middle of the town square that you investigate. Also remember to place the clue tokens down, they're very important. Priority player then picks a side of the board. He sets up there, and the opposing player, so the secondary player, sets up on the opposite side of the board. Then the turn order goes like this. The priority player, so the player who just won initiative, goes first. They act with half their army rounded down. So if you got 7 dudes, 3. If you got 8 dudes, 4. If you got 5 dudes, 2. Then the monster goes. The monster gets a turn. He savages people, which we'll talk about more how the monster acts in the monster phase. And then player 2 moves everything, and then player 1 finishes moving their guys. Once that's done, initiative's rolled again, and play continues until one squad's dead, or one of the squads has left the board. They have no more units on the board. So you leave the board by just moving off the board. Now, the other thing is to remember is that even though each scenario has objectives and monsters, you do not need to actually fight said monster or complete said objectives. You can leave at any point. Once your unit's off the board, you have left the game. Let's go over what the players can do. So the players can activate a certain number of units. Generally, it's half or all. So each model, when activated, can take a move action, which obviously is just their speed, which for the most part will be a 6. So he can just move, and he's done one action, and then he can do any other action. So he can shoot or fight if he's able to, or whatever else he can do, which we'll go over what each one does. Now, since we're covering move right now, when you finish your move, you can also decide to sprint. So you roll 2 dice. If you roll over an 11 or better, you can move an additional 4 inches. And if you roll a 10 or less, you can only move 2. You can also, during your move, you can move into combat and have a sword fight with the person, which we'll cover in the shooting section. I know this sounds a bit weird, but basically, combat pretty much runs the same way. You can also jump half to jump over gaps. So let's just say that this river tile here is extremely deep.
That's what she said.
And I can't just move around it. Well, let's move this guy back a bit. I can move 3 inches instead of 6 and jump it like that. The other thing is with moving, if you move within 1 inch of an enemy soldier, so say I move like around to here, he can choose to engage me in close combat. Anytime you attack in close combat, though, you do get a fatigue token, which gives you -1 to hit, -1 defense, and if you have 2 or more, you cannot use the intercepting rule. So let's just say, for argument's sake, this junior officer had 2 fatigue tokens and I move 1 inch in. Tough tits, basically. So there are 3 major actions that you can take on your turn. So move is obviously the 4th major action. So you can shoot or fight in close combat. So it pretty much runs the same way either way. So let's just say I wanted to shoot with my pistol or my rifle. I measure the appropriate distance out. So yeah, that would be fine. And then I take my 2 dice and I roll them. So that's a horrible roll. So the way this works is I take my power and my skill dice, I roll them. If they are equal or higher than my opponent's defense, I hit, and damage is dealt based on either the skill or the power dice, depending on what the weapon says. So let's say, for example, I rolled a 9 on this. So a 9 plus a 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13, which is the junior officer's defense. Now, because I'm using my pistol, it says it uses the power dice for damage, so I deal 3 points of damage to him. So that means that both attack and damage are done on the same dice roll. Now, if I fail to hit, of course, let's say we'll change this to a 5, like how badly I rolled the first time, then no damage is dealt, even though I rolled a 3 on the damage dice. Now, close combat is the same, except fatigue, of course, and also in close combat, obviously, he would get to strike back if he chooses. He can choose not to. So when I attack in close combat, say this is my close combat attack, I missed, then the junior officer can go, I don't want to, and move 1 inch back. Otherwise, he can attack back. He missed as well. They both get a fatigue, and then my guy has to move back. So that's the only difference. Now, there are a couple of penalties to shooting at ranged. If you move, like so if I move my guy and then shot, he gets -1 to hit. If the soldier is in cover, it's another -1 to hit, so that would be -2. These are cumulative. And then finally, if my guy was on a horse, he gets -2 to hit regardless. So -2, terrain, -3. So it's very hard to actually shoot something while on horseback. That's actually a pretty good roll. That's a 14. But that would still be a miss, because it would be an 11. Now, speaking of shooting, obviously, after I've shot, I put my little red token down, and now I know I need to reload with that guy. Yeah, I now need to know that I have to reload. So reloading is the next action. It's pretty straightforward. You fire a gun, you need to reload it. That's just common sense. The good news is that you don't have to actually spend an action, like one of your precious other action points on reloading. You can choose to use a move action to reload, and then you could shoot again. Obviously, this would be second turn because we've already moved and shot with this guy first turn, and I placed this token. But next turn, I can just go and then shoot. This can obviously be very good for riflemen because they have a 30-inch range, which, considering the table space is not that big, it means that they can pretty much just find a nice piece of terrain to sit on and then just keep shooting. Finally, we have investigating. So let's just say we've got our clue token here. And you know what? I'll grab these and shuffle them. So we've got our clue token. It's very simple. You just move up to the clue token and then you investigate it. Or if you're already staying next to it, you can use a move action to investigate. So how does this work? Well, what you do is you shuffle your cards, you draw one. In this case, it's the king. You then would read the scenario, whatever that might be, and it could range from many things. We'll go more in depth on that in playing the game section. So yeah, they're the three major actions: attacking, reloading, and investigating. But obviously moving is also important as well. Finally, you can use your dice pool for some actions as well. So the dice pool can be used to re-roll any dice the same color. So let's just say I go, oh, okay, that's actually a good roll. Let's say I really want to hit this guy. I've rolled terribly. So I take one of my green dice and I roll it, and that's improved it. Still not enough, but I can also roll the blue dice. Now you can only re-roll each dice once, so I'd have to take that. But they could turn out to be something else. The other thing you can do with dice pool dice is you can remove one of any color except for the monster dice, and you can rapid reload. So that is a free reload, basically. And that also obviously removes it from the game. You can also use it to reduce damage. So say I hit this guy and, oh boy, 7 points of damage is not light. So your guy goes, and he resists 10 points of damage with that roll. So he takes no damage. But obviously, if I rolled, say, a 4, it would be the difference between the two dice. So he would take 3 points of damage instead. And then finally, the monster dice can do some very specific things to monsters, but it can only really be used for monster purposes, not for anything on yours, which I'll talk about in the monster turn. Okay, so we've got our big bad monster here. So how does it work? It's a pretty simple structure. The monster basically moves towards the closest target and attacks it. Bang. And then the opponent rolls the dice for the monster and see how we go. If it can't reach then and it has a ranged attack, then it will use it on the closest model as well. They follow the same rules as any other model, except they are generally infatigable. They do not take fatigue, they can just keep fighting. However, you can use your black dice to do a few things with the monster. First things first, you can make it so that you can change how it moves. So say we take this scenario again. My opponent doesn't want their guy charged, so he spends his black dice and moves the monster into my guy instead. Which could be dangerous, might be a help, who knows. The other thing you can do is, say you roll this, and you're like, oh man, this is bad. But I want to make it worse. And then you can replace the dice. The monster dice cannot be used to make a monster worse at an action. So if, say I was to roll a 2, it wouldn't replace either 2 of these dice because that would be worse. But it can replace it if it's better. The final thing the monster dice can do is say I attack the monster, I'm dealing 5 points of damage, you don't like that, and then you block it. So very, very much similar to other colored dice, but in this scenario it can only be used for the monster, and it can be used to replace either dice when those actions do happen. So that's pretty nifty. but otherwise they are not very useful to you as a player if the monster is dead and gone. Alright, so one of the other things to remember is the terror check. These will pop up occasionally, either via objective markers or monsters, ooh, you know. Sometimes they can be scary. Basically, a terror check is you roll your 2 dice, you know, you add your thing to it, and then if you fail, depending on how much you fail by is what will happen. Sometimes, you know, so if you roll 2 or less on the roll, they become a gibbering madman and flee the field. They're just gone, they're removed from the board. They may end up being much more insane once you find them again at the end of the game. They may be fine. Maybe they just had a temporary mental break. Then there's like a gibbering mess, basically, like, so they can't really do much until they pass a terror check. Once they do, they are then shaken for the rest of the game. Shaken is just -1 to hit and defense. And then there's some other minor ones above that, but they're the major ones. One of my ones, my son's junior officer became a bit of a mess on the field, and he did eventually recover. Oh wait, no he didn't, I shot him. I mean, he did recover from the madness. He recovered because he got shot. And he did survive, just for the record. No injuries, he was fine. But yeah, so that's another thing to sort of contend with, is terror. It doesn't happen super duper often, but it does happen enough. So once the game's set up, you'll need to read the goals of the scenario. Now, each scenario obviously has different goals. Generally, there are 3 to 5 clue markers, which need their corresponding playing cards for the scenario, and 3 to 5 objectives that will also take part in the scenario. When you complete an objective, your side will get experience, so that's important. When you kill monsters, you also get experience, so that's also important. The playing cards are shuffled at the start of the game and are drawn when someone investigates a token. So if I come over here and investigate this token, I draw the card, and I got the Ace of Clubs. Then that's removed, but let's just say there's another marker here, and then this guy, he draws another card and he gets the Queen of Clubs. So this continues until all the markers are investigated. So, and then with these, when you draw a playing card, it will tell you what to do. Maybe you find an artifact. Maybe you discover the monster. Woo! Maybe you find a friend that has been partially eaten, which freaks you guys out and makes him shit himself. Yep, so the game ends when all soldiers have left the table, or have been removed from the table, depending on what it is. To seize an item, you generally have to leave through your own deployment zone, but that's not always a hard and fast rule. Once that's done, you then take each surviving member, they get 1 XP, and then you get a bonus XP that you can give to any soldier in your unit, based on the objectives achieved and whether or not that you've killed any monsters. So, you know, if you kill a hobgoblin, you might get 2 experience points, and then you may also have achieved 3 or 4 different objectives. Different objectives do different things. The only one that I've seen consistently pop up every game is kill 3 of the opposing army. Killing 3 of the opposing army nets you 2 experience points, but the other ones are like, sometimes it's wound a monster, sometimes it's kill the monster, sometimes it's both. Other times it's, you know, investigate a certain number of objective markers. You know, you get +1 experience per marker with a maximum generally. And then other ones are like, obviously, if there's an artifact or something that needs to be discovered, escaping the board with said artifact. So they're sort of like the objectives, and then, yeah, once that's all done, if your guy was removed from the board for any reason, he may need to roll either an injury or a terror check, depending on how he had to leave the board. So he may have gone insane, or he may be severely injured or dead. Most of the time, you will be fine. Anything over a 5, you guys find. And that's it. That's Silver Bayonet, baby! You know, when I decided to play this game, I'd just actually been recently watching Sharp, like with Sean Bean. And the idea of having him fight werewolves or vampires actually sounded pretty cool. Like, I thought it sounded good. To be honest, I really didn't think that most of the people I play with would have much of an interest in this game. Well, since the first game that we played, my son has been asking non-stop to keep playing this. No joke, he can't stop. He wants to just keep playing. Every day, can we play more Silver Bayonet? Can we play more Silver Bayonet? He loves it! And I understand the game is extremely fun. It's straightforward. It has a great little theme. The dice pool is a very cool system that I haven't really seen pop up much. The story you get to tell with your unit is just so fun. Like, you know, like, you get guys who sort of stir up all the time. My son's characters, the rifleman is this guy who never misses, and honestly, he's not even that good of a shot, but he never misses his shots. He hits all of them. We've got our light cav over here, my son's light cav, who got his foot shot to the point that he's crippled now, but it doesn't matter because he's on a horse. We've got my doctor, who always seems to get shot very severely every single game. We've got my half vampire, my Dampier, who is a horse slayer. If he gets in combat with Cav, he absolutely wrecks him. We've got my over-ambitious light Cav, who always seems to get into the worst spots. He always seems to miss attacks that he should hit and then gets absolutely murdered by a monster or something like that. So it's just a really fun SWAD-based game. And I strongly recommend it for anyone looking for a SWAD-based game because it's worth every silver shilling. It's great length. The games don't go for ages. They're about an hour and a half long at most. It has some very solid rules, which is great. And you can use whatever minis you want. I mean, it's not necessarily based on any miniature system. So buy some cheap minis or 3D print them, as someone may have done. Look, if an 8-year-old can enjoy it, anyone can enjoy it, right? So good hunting, my Silver Bayonets. So here's where I summarize Silver Bayonet. Yeah, I mean, the setting is relatable. Many people know about Napoleonic Era. The Gothic horror gives it a dash of flavor that's really fun. The rules are very solid but straightforward. I love the dice pool system. I think that's a really nifty way to do rerolls and stuff like that, because it's how important is that reroll to you? How important is this attack to go through? Can you wait until a more opportune moment? So I really like that system because it gives you a lot of control, but it doesn't give you too much control either. You have to balance out. You have to think strategically with the rerolls. You can't be using them all the time. And obviously, having the rudimentary AI with the monsters adds a bit of extra flavor to what is a SWAD versus SWAD game. Just having to think about that extra little dash of, ooh, what are these guys going to do? Can these guys actually hurt me? Can I hurt them? Are they just an annoyance? Should I ignore them? Also, I like the fact that there is no clear, winner in every game, right? Sometimes you can walk away and just have some good experience on your army, right? And that itself is a victory. So you don't always necessarily have to win the game. You can choose to cut your losses and pull out. I wouldn't suggest doing that first turn, but I guess you could. But yeah, so overall, I just think it's a very fun game, and I think many people should give it a go. It's good, it's nice and cheap, you know. The digital rulebook is not too expensive, and you just need some D10s. And then you probably have you're probably good to go. You could even play it with Grimdark Future miniatures or whatever, sci-fi minis. You know, just aliens and then have single shotguns. Done. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. If you've liked the content, drop a like, hit subscribe, and you'll get to see more of it. Otherwise, I'll catch you on the next one. See yous.